What's up, tribe? How you guys doing? Go ahead and hit that subscribe button. I hope you like this video. So let's talk Salt and Pepper. Tonight the Salt and Pepper movie came out on Lifetime. It was highly anticipated, especially for people like myself who grew up, like, I literally grew up on Salt and Pepper. Like, I literally remember the first time I heard Your Mic Sound Nice, which was the song for me, which I didn't hear the whole movie. Hello, Salt and Pepper. No Mic Sound Nice? No I'll Take Your Man? We did hear some lyrics from I'll Take Your Man. So I know Showstopper was their first single, but I didn't that's not the first song I remember. The first song I remember is Mic Sound Nice. And I remember, if you're from DC, you're gonna remember this. I remember Conan, he would do his hip hop countdown every night. And I remember it being on the countdown, and that was my first introduction to Salt and Pepper. Of course, as a young lady growing up during that hip hop era, you remember the female rappers because there weren't that many of them. So you remember Salt and Pepper for what Salt and Pepper is. I'm not gonna say was, is the icons that they are, what they did, the doors that they knocked down. And so it was great to see their story from their perspective. Now, here's the thing about biopics that you have to remember. There's always going to be a difference between the biopic when the person is talking about themselves, and then the biopic when someone else tells your story. Because someone else, generally speaking, they're not vested in making you look good. They're vested in staying true to the story. Whereas when you are telling your own story, there's a level of, I want to come out of this looking good. Overall, I think they did a good job of giving us the story. If you don't know anything about Salt and Pepper, it definitely gives you insight and introspection. I think that they did a good job of staying true to the hairstyles, the clothing, the costumes of the time, and the way in which it went through, right? So that's the great stuff, right? That's the good stuff. If you know Salt and Pepper's origin story, I'll say, then you know that Salt and Pepper met in college, worked at Sears. I knew I knew Herbie worked with them, and I think I knew Kid and Play worked with them. I don't think I remembered that Martin Lawrence worked with them. I don't know if I remembered that part. And Martin Lawrence is a DC boy, but he had migrated his way to New York by that time to try to, make it big, which of course he did. So let me just go through my notes, and I'll talk about them as we go through, because I want to make sure I hit the stuff. So we start the movie off at the Hip Hop Honor Awards. Again, if you remember, VH1 for a while did a Hip Hop Honors Awards, where it started off really honoring the pioneers of hip hop, going back to the people of the time. And so Salt and Pepper was honored in 2005, I believe it was. At that point, they were no longer a group. And I don't know if a lot of people realized when Salt and Pepper broke up, and I guess to the extent that Salt and Pepper broke up, meaning like that their relationship was so fractured. You always knew that that the group was very distinct personalities. Very distinct personalities. Pepper was always Pepper, she was always out there. Boom, boom, boom. And Salt was always sort of the quiet, reserved, sensible one. Like, that was the image that you always got of them. And it seems like that was really true to form. That even behind the scenes, when they met, Salt was very, laced up, church going. Pepper sort of took her out of her comfort zone. And I think it's best that at the end of the movie, Salt says that she said Sandy pulled her out of her box, and she kept her from going over the edge. So they worked for each other, right? Sandy is from Jamaica, but grew up in New York. And then Salt, of course, is from Brooklyn. I think it was Brooklyn. Now, she didn't touch too much on her relationship with her parents, but we did find out later on in the movie that her dad was an alcoholic, and we didn't get too deep into that. And she said in interviews that she wasn't going to really dig too deep into that. And I think for the story that they told, we didn't necessarily need it. I think she touched on it when it was appropriate to say, hey, neither one of us, because Sandy's dad died when she was young. So she basically to say neither one of us grew up with examples of what a good man looks like and what, so we keep choosing bad. We keep making bad decisions, right? So there was that. When they did the hip hop honors, they hadn't even talked in 4 years, much less performed or hung out. So they hadn't even talked. They were in a really, really bad place. So their story starts in 1985. Now, Salt was dating Herbie, who was their producer, right? Now, here's the thing. It was a great love story from the outside looking in, but when you were in it, basically, he cheated on her bad to the point where she finally left him when he had a baby outside of their relationship, according to the movie. Sandy talks about the fact that she was a cutter after her dad died. That she, dealing with his grief, that she was a cutter, and I found that to be something very interesting that we shared. Okay, I'm all over the place, y'all, but work with me. One of my criticisms with, and it's not just this movie, I find this with a lot of these types of movies, I feel like you touch on these big topics and then you gloss over them. So you were a cutter. How did you stop? Did you go to therapy? Like, you know what I mean? You throw it out there and then you just leave it like, yeah, one day I just stopped. Well, what was the process in that? You know what I'm saying? They do that throughout the movie. They throw some really serious things out there that I don't think they give us closure on or really explore. Now, granted, it was already a 3-hour movie, so it wasn't but so much they could go through and get deep into. I get that. But I'm just going through, y'all. I'm just going through my thoughts as I'm talking. One of their biggest breaks was, from the very beginning, there was tension between Herbie and Sandy. I think that's probably real true to form. I feel like their personalities probably clashed from the beginning. One of their first big situations, they went to the Crush Groove, release party. Again, Crush Groove was a huge movie in hip-hop history, if you don't know about it. Now, they touch on the fact that Sandy Pepa dated Prince Marky D from the Fat Boys. I always thought their relationship was deeper than what they showed it in the movie, but maybe not. They got their record deal. Now, this, I think, starts from the very beginning. You see, Herbie was like, listen, he took Salt with him to the meeting with the record label, and basically their advance was something like $14,000, and Salt thought they should split it 3 ways, and he was like, hell no. He was like, the group is me and you. Like, I'm not dividing anything with her 3 ways. Now, if you want to split your money in half with her, cool, but I'm not splitting nothing. And that seemed to be the pattern of their financial relationship until Salt started talking to other people in the industry and learning that they were basically being robbed. I mean, not Salt Pepa, that they were basically being robbed, and they actually banded together and went and renegotiated a better deal later on in the movie. But in the beginning, and so I think that sort of set up a lot of that. We had a situation with a fake Salt and Pepper, so they went through that. Salt got her ass beat trying to defend her man, honey. Herbie was getting his ass beat. She went to defend him. Hell, they beat her ass too. He was doing some shady dealing with a local, pimp or whatever. Now, what I find interesting, a few things were left out of their earlier on story. They made it seem like their name was real easy, that they came up with their name Salt and Pepper because of the lyrics from My Mic Sounds Nice, or Salt and Pepper MCs, yeah. But their original name was Supernature. Was it Supernature? Yeah, Supernature. And you hear that in the lyrics for Mic Sounds Nice too. And I feel like they made it seem like, oh, we don't have a name. Ooh, Salt and Pepper. Ooh, great name from the lyrics. Boom. And I'm like, but that's not, at least that's not the way I remember it. I remember their name originally being Supernature, and I don't know if they didn't get it trademarked or if people just started calling. I forgot the reason where, I forgot where the whole Pepper came from, if you really want the truth. But I know that wasn't their original name, but maybe I missed that in the movie. I mean, I could have missed it. But they realized that they were able to be infiltrated with these fake Salt and Peppers because people knew their voices, but people knew their song, but people didn't know who they were. And so Herbie was smart, and he hired a team, which was basically his family, but it's cool. They did the job. And that's when we were first introduced with their first Spinderella, one girl by the name of LaToya. Now, it is strongly insinuated that LaToya was sleeping with Herbie. I remember this, and I've said this before in one of my lives. I remember Salt-N-Pepa coming to DC and performing at the Cap Center. I don't know what tour. I can't tell you who they was on tour with because I probably went to every concert at the damn Cap Center that had anybody hip-hop on it, okay? So I don't remember which tour. But what I do remember is that was the first time we were introduced to D, Spinderella, Dee, and they talked about their old DJ like a dog. Do you hear me? Now, mind you, just before the days of social media and people could screenshot stuff and people could record it and upload it onto the internet. But baby, if they had talked about that girl now, the way they talked about that girl that night, I mean, they talked about how she couldn't hang and they had to go get them a real one and she won't loyal. I mean, they dogged her out. You hear me? Dogged her out, okay? So then we get our second DJ Spinderella. Now, there was a lot of controversy this week, and I'll dig deep into this when I do a live, but about Dee not being involved in the movie. She wasn't a consultant. The girl who played her never talked to her to get, I guess, her point of view and all of that. That's what I'm going to say about that. I do not like the way the Salt-N-Pepa story has ended with Spinderella. I don't. As a fan of the group, as somebody who grew up with the group, I don't know anything about the inner workings of their relationship. But as someone on the outside looking in, as a fan, it just doesn't sit well with me. I'm going to be honest. It really leaves a really bad taste in my mouth. I feel like clearly she was mentioned in the movie. Clearly she was in the movie. But there was no dynamic to her character. She was just there. And I think that is disingenuous to the Salt-N-Pepa story. I understand that it started with y'all. I understand that y'all was digging in them trenches before Spin came along. I get it. But I also feel like it's not fair to have revisionist history and act like that woman wasn't a major part of y'all's story. Because she was. Because I ain't going to tell my age, but I'm going to tell you that concert where she took over, I was still in high school. I'm old now. Okay? So she was around damn near since the beginning. Now, she wasn't in the trenches. She wasn't there every night. I get that. But she was there a lot. And I feel like we could have given a lot more dynamic to her story. She had a whole wedding and baby that was never even acknowledged in the movie. We saw Salt-N-Pepa's kids and marriages and relationships. But, I mean, hell, you could have just shown the girl pregnant at one point. I mean, there was nothing. We saw one scene with her with some dialogue outside of, basic, taking pictures and being on stage. And that was pretty much for Salt to tell her she couldn't go out and to go practice her DJ skills. It just, anyway, I'm gonna let that go. Okay, Cheryl, they show how Cheryl sort of evolved into a producer role with Herbie being less and less attentive to them as a group. And her kind of having to take that on. So I thought that was interesting that we saw how she sort of evolved. Now let me tell you something else that they didn't say it, they alluded to, okay? They alluded to this. I find it very interesting now. I find it very interesting, and I've said this again. I've said this before as well. People like, and this is no dig at Nicki Minaj. I'm just using that as an example. People like Nicki Minaj always want to come after other rappers. I'm going to use Cardi B as an example. Because she always wants to talk about how she doesn't write her own lyrics. And I'm a real lyricist. I write my own lyrics. And I do this and I do that. And I've said before, a lot of MCs don't write their own lyrics. Didn't then, don't now. And if you noticed, you saw how Herbie wrote a lot of those early lyrics for them. That does not mean they didn't write their songs later on. That doesn't mean they couldn't. But you saw how they did not. Do we want to take any credit away from Salt-N-Pepa now? You see what I'm saying? Yeah, y'all understand what I'm saying? We're not gonna take no credit away from Salt and Pepper. That's just me. That's just me. Uh um so Pep started dating some dude. Now again, word on the curb is he was a street hustler. So them street pharmaceuticals. But in the movie, they sort of, I feel like they glossed over it and they were like, oh yeah, he owns some businesses. But she ends up falling in love, getting pregnant by him, and having her first son. We saw how he basically, the minute she popped up pregnant, he was like, oh, deuces. Like, oh, you pregnant? Oh, I'm out. And so that pretty much ended that relationship. And then soon after, Saul got pregnant. Saul got pregnant. And she got pregnant by Gavin, who eventually became her husband. But he was not her husband when they got married. And they actually broke up for a little while. And they ended up getting back together. I feel like things started pulling at them as a group. It wasn't just Salt getting saved. That had a lot to do with it when Salt got saved. Because it changed her as a person. And it does, that happens. We evolve. But I think it was a combination of the years of it. I think it was a combination of their popularity waning. I think it was a combination of just two very opposite personalities going in two very different directions. Salt wanted to get away from, she wanted to figure out who she was outside of Salt and Pepper. Peppa was perfectly fine being Peppa. She loved the life. She loved being in Hollywood. She loved the spotlight. Like, you can even see it now. Like, Peppa's on reality shows and doing things on social media, very active. And, Peppa's just, Salt was just kind of like, I'm here to do my job. But when I get done doing my job, I'm going home to my children, And that really pulled them apart. It was, like I said, it was a combination of, I think, all of the above. I don't think it was any one thing that did it. We saw where Herbie sued them because they no longer wanted him to manage them. And he actually sued them and he lost. So they didn't get too deep into the lawsuit and what the ins and outs and what he, why he lost the lawsuit. But I guess maybe his contract had expired, or I don't know, because it seemed like he had a valid contract with them. I don't know, but they did offer him a buyout. So maybe the court felt like, listen, they offered you a perfectly good buyout. You chose not to take it. Whatever. And then they even, when they won the lawsuit, they did mention that Spin was going to have a solo album, because Pep said something about, now we can get your solo album done. Well, we never saw that now, do we? Of course, we see the relationship between Pep and Tretch. They insinuated the abuse. They never saw him physically they never showed Tretch physically put his hands on her, but certainly they showed the controlling nature. They showed the abusive, the verbal abuse, that we saw all of that. And we saw her struggle with being with him, breaking up, making up, breaking up, making up, breaking up, making up kind of thing. Again, we saw them come back together, but again, I just feel like we glossed over so much. Was it a good surface movie? Yes, we got the surface. We got the details on the surface. But I feel like a lot of the in-depth, and I get it. It's 3 hours, y'all. It's only but so much you can put in 3 hours. I get it. But I just, as a fan who knew a lot of this already, I just feel like I didn't learn a lot of new information. Now, maybe for somebody who didn't grow up with Salt and Pepper and who wasn't reading Word Up magazine and reading the interviews and seeing them on Arsenio Hall, and like a lot of that stuff I remember seeing in real time, the MTV tour bus interview, like I remember a lot of that stuff in real time. So for me, I just don't feel like I walked away knowing anything I didn't already know. We saw Salt, her battle with bulimia. She's been public about that. But again, we saw a moment where her pastor was preaching Mario Van Peebles, yes, boo. But we saw what he was preaching about purging and things like that. And we saw that's the moment when she cried and she called Peppa and said she was out. But again, we didn't get, how did you get over it? Did you go to therapy? How did you work past it? You know what I'm saying? I don't know, y'all. I'm going to have to give it, I would give it a solid C plus, B minus. Oh, my hair. I mean, a C plus, B minus. I would have to give it. Yeah, C plus, B minus. Maybe y'all feel differently. Y'all let me know. Put it in the comments. Am I being hard? Am I being too easy? I don't know. Y'all let me know what y'all think. Anyway, I'll talk to y'all later. Peace. Oh, my bad. I guess I should say that they came back together we saw at the end of the movie where they kind of came back together at the Hip Hop Awards, and they basically sort of made up on stage. Like, they weren't speaking at the beginning, and then by the end of the performance, they were hugging and talking about, I miss you, girl, I miss you too. So, okay. But anyway, y'all let me know.